Welcome to Season 6 of the Art of Teaching podcast. I'm Matthew Green and I'm so glad that you joined me today. Before we get started with this week's interview, I wanted to say a quick thank you to all those that have subscribed, listened to and shared the episodes. If you get a chance, please take a few minutes to leave a review and comment on iTunes. It will help get the episodes to as many teachers as possible. Today I have a very special episode to share with you. Keishia Thorpe is the winner of the 2022 Global Teacher Prize. She fled poverty and violence as a child from Jamaica and encountered racism as a black immigrant in the US, where she had come on a track and field scholarship. Her commitment to mentoring students who were all immigrants themselves and helping them find paths to higher education saw her named National Life Group's Lifechanger of the Year Grand Prize winner for the 2018 to 2019 school year. She has dedicated herself to mentoring college applicants and student athletes, as well as expanding access to subsidised testing, financial aid, and full scholarships. We talked about how she overcame unthinkable obstacles and became the most recognised teacher in the world, the importance of representation and why it matters so much, and the power of determination and vision and how to instill this into young people. Keishia was a wonderful guest and it was an incredible privilege to speak to her. Keishia, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Where are you phoning in from?
Maryland, USA.
How's Maryland this time of year?
It's pretty warm this time of year, but today has been pretty good because it rained a little yesterday, so cooled the temperature down a little bit. So we're probably around in the 70s.
Fantastic. And I think that is probably about late 20s, early 30s centigrade. I'll have to do my math on that. I'm not too sure what that is, but it sounds wonderful. But quite possibly the most important question for the interview, what's your coffee order?
My coffee order. I'm not a big coffee drinker,
okay,
but when I do go to Starbucks, I'll get the caramel ribbon crunch frappuccino. Yeah.
Fantastic. It sounds very indulgent. I'll have to try it. We just had a Starbucks quite close to us, so I'll let you know. What's an item just out of interest that is still on your bucket list? I mean, you've achieved so much in your career, but is there anything else that you are still wanting to achieve in your life?
In my bucket list, one of the things I would really want to do is travel to Africa. That's on my bucket list. And also, hopefully in the near future, have my own school. So those are two things on my bucket list.
Fantastic. Why is Africa such an important destination for you?
It's because it's a part of my cultural heritage. I've never been there. I know I've studied Marcus Garvey and the Back to Africa movement.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in it, very interested in the motherland. Also, I have a nonprofit organization that helps students from Africa as well. And I'm really interested in seeing the conditions that they live in. A lot of different things have been shown on television and you wonder what is true and what is not. And I've seen both worlds play out on television, the nature, the beauty, and then also the degradation and the poverty. So just to go and see for myself, and just to get in touch with that side of me. I did my background, and I think I'm part Cameroonian. So yeah, that would be interesting.
Fantastic. It's such a wonderful and a diverse continent. It would be lovely to spend some time over there and just to get to know some of the incredible people. And so, it sounds like a wonderful trip. Just out of interest, Keishia, what if you could have a dinner party with anybody, who would be there?
A dinner party.
Obviously,
Queen
your family and
Elizabeth.
friends are
Yeah,
included in
Queen
the book.
Elizabeth. Yes, I'm from Jamaica, and we were a British colony,
Yeah,
and so a lot of their influence. I grew up around a lot of British influence, and so yeah, I would love to have tea with, with or dinner with Queen Elizabeth. I love. I'm a great fan of Celine Dion. How poetic her music is. Elton John is a big fan too. I know that's kind of like a weird combination.
yeah,
But yeah, all of them I admire for different reasons.
fantastic. I mean, that sounds like an incredible dinner party. Elton John, Queen
I,
Elizabeth, and yeah, Celine
and
Dion.
Indian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was born in the UK, and so I'm such a fan of Queen Elizabeth. I think that she's just an amazing woman when you consider how many presidents and prime ministers she has lived through her reign. She would be it would be amazing, I think, to sit down and just have a cup of tea with
Yes.
Elizabeth. It'd be really wonderful. I'm just wondering, Keishia, is there a book that you have read recently that has caused you to reconsider things in your life?
Yes. Bedina Love. We can do more than just survive. I read it over COVID when that big racial storm hit the US with the George Floyd scenario.
Yeah,
Yeah, I read that book and learned so much about intersectionality, learned so much about myself. And as as an immigrant in the US, just learning so much more about who you are,
yeah,
um, how to take your place in society, how to advocate for yourself, how to empower those around you, how
yeah,
to empower yourself, how to love yourself.
yeah.
Just there's just so much about the African American culture that I've discovered from
Wow.
just reading the book that is so personally empowering.
Wow, that's really beautiful, and it's so lovely that you are someone who continually learns about your culture and continually discovers the richness and diversity of your background. I think that's really wonderful. Keisha, just on that, what was your upbringing like, and what was it like growing up in Jamaica and moving to the US?
Well,
Good question.
I grew up in Jamaica,
Yeah,
and I grew up with many different challenges. I grew up with my grandmother and my twin sister, and you know, there were so many challenges because we are, financially,
yeah,
I grew up in poverty,
yeah,
and in Jamaica, the thing about Jamaica is that school costs, right? There's no free school in Jamaica. So everybody has to pay for education. And so because of that, you know, you there's a lot of different struggles. And for me and my sister, growing up with my grandmother, we had many financial challenges. And my grandmother, who cared for my sister and I, really wanted the best for us. And so by the time I got to high school, I really advocated for myself to go to a school outside of my boundary school
wow,
because of the poverty and violence that was in my community. And so the principal at the time at that school was so impressed with the advocacy of my sister and I to really want to escape that and want more for ourselves, that, she allowed us to attend the school at a reduced cost.
wow,
And it was, yeah, it was, that school was a top school. So, naturally you're drawn to that. And naturally as well, just being able to attend that school has opened many doors of opportunities for my sister and I. We were able to go to different sporting events. We're able to do track and field, which really, I always tell people, for me, was a vehicle out of poverty, because
wow,
I was able to get a track and field scholarship out of it. I met a wonderful coach while I was in high school that was a pivotal point for me in my life, that helped me discover my talents in track and field. And he eventually ended up becoming like a father to myself and
wow.
my sister, who did not have a father growing up.
Mhm.
And he helped us to scout out scholarships for
Wow,
college as well.
wow.
So yeah,
Look, that
it was tough. It was really tough, but we got by.
wow, that's so wonderful, and what a great story of overcoming some incredible odds. And do you think that has that sort of transformative power of education has shaped the way that you teach your students? I mean, how has that changed you as an educator?
Yeah, living here in the US, for me, I really don't take much for granted. I don't take anything for granted because, I really believe that the American dream, anyone can achieve the American dream if you're willing to work hard for it. And of course, there are many barriers that immigrants have to overcome, but I realize that the more ambitious and resilient that we're able to overcome more. And we kind of really carry the future of our children, our people, our country, which is such a huge responsibility. So it's like every day I wake up and I'm trying to figure out what else I can do to secure the future for generations, for my generation and generations of immigrants to come. And It makes me work really hard because I want to, but also because I have to, if that makes sense. And I just feel like it is, I have the opportunity to leave a legacy and I want to do so.
Gosh, I'm getting goosebumps. It's 4:00 in the morning over in Sydney, and it's so wonderful to hear your story. And for someone who isn't familiar in any way with the context of race in the United States, and also some of the challenges that so many people face, I just wanted to touch on something in your bio, and I'd love you to take the time to unpack it if you don't mind. And you said in your bio, you talked about how Black students were disproportionately underrepresented in their schools and under-resourced. And I was just wondering if you could spend a few moments talking about this and what are some of the implications in education from your experience that you've seen, because it seems like we have such a long way to go in terms of establishing equality for all students. So I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I said to you earlier that where I grew up in Jamaica, education is not free. And I remember going to my former high school and advocating for myself because I know that that particular school had more resources than my boundary school that I attended. And I know that could help me to get ahead and create like a more successful path to my dreams. And just fast forward from that, I came to the US to fulfill my dreams of getting out of poverty. And I was a bit surprised, I guess, to see that it was not all the glitz and glamour that you see on TV. And there were urban areas that were concentrated with students that looked like me. And when I had a chance to really tutor in those urban schools, I realized that they were no different from the boundary schools and the neighborhoods that I was trying to really avoid growing up. And so most of the students do not seem to have many options because of the guidelines that limit their options to go outside of their boundaries to attend other schools and seek opportunities for themselves. But then moving forward, as I got into teaching, I really experienced firsthand a lot of the inequities in the system that greatly also contributed to the achievement and opportunity gaps that exist even to this day. And so most of the students who are minority and are from like disadvantaged backgrounds, most of them will actually complete like 12 years of their education, if they even get that far, right? In their marginal neighborhoods with under-resourced and underfunded schools. And this is something that's, can be alarming for most people who are not inside of the education system, but being inside of it and experiencing it, for us, it's just really appalling, It
is.
And I wonder, I wonder, and no wonder really why, graduation rates and dropout rates are so low. Graduation rates are so low, and then dropout rates are so high, especially for students who are African American or Hispanic.
It's such a complicated issue, and thank goodness for people like yourself that are willing to make a stand. And how important do you think it is, Keishia, to actually be someone that has, so to speak, boots on the ground and knows what's going on, and is someone who is actually working with these children, understanding the context in which they're from?
I think it is so important. I always say my stories, my students' stories. It's so important because it gives you that level of understanding, of knowing where they're coming from, and just an idea of where they're going, and to be able to really advocate for the things that they need the most. When you think about the schools that most of these students who are underrepresented are in, you think about the fact that they put ineffective principals in these schools, inexperienced first-year principals. For a vulnerable population of students, right? We have our students experience in these schools where they have a lot of lack of funding.
Wow.
When we think about funding formula and how these schools are funded to meet the needs of those students who are in the most vulnerable population, and then we talk about representation, and we really talk about the fact that representation matters. Students need to see teachers that look like them as well in these schools. Research even says that students who see teachers that look like them at least one throughout their whole 12 years of education are more likely to be successful, and even more likely to want to go to college. So when I think about the work that I'm doing, I really think that there's a lot more that needs to be done, and a lot more people that look like me that need to be immersed into the education system.
Fantastic. And I'm very fortunate to have, I've got two beautiful daughters who are just about to start in the education system in Australia. And I think it's so interesting what you're saying about representation. I mean, my wife is Indian, South African, and my daughters are the first Australian-born people in our family. And so I naively and rather stupidly had never really thought about representation until I traveled to South Africa, and I was the one that stood out, so to speak. And so it's something which I am so aware of, the way that the color and the look of the dolls that kids see in local stores, the importance of role models and people seeing others that look like them is so incredibly important. And I just commend you for being a voice for those students, and actually having your, as I said, boots on the ground and doing the work, because it's just so important. And I couldn't imagine how difficult that would be growing up and not seeing people that looked and talked and shared culture like you. I think that would be really, really difficult. And I couldn't possibly understand what that's like. And I think that's why that's so important, that there are people like yourself that are really making that difference in the lives of our young people. So thank you for that. If no one else says thank you for that. I wanted to just ask you, so how on earth did you go from a migrant, a young migrant from another country, to the winner of the Global Teacher Prize last year? I mean, that is an incredible achievement. Has it been a bit of a roller coaster? Do you have to pinch yourself and wake up and go, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Or what's that experience been like for you?
It's been an awesome adventure, just from the beginning. I mean, I really cannot thank the Varkey Foundation and UNESCO enough for just really believing in me to carry that torch. And of course, I'm the first Black female to win the prize. So for me, that is, of course, an awesome experience, because I know that there's so many young people that looks like me. We were just talking about representation matters, right? That are looking up to me and are thinking, wow, that is possible. I remember when Barack Obama just became president in the United States.
I remember that.
My daughter was 3 years old, about 4 years old. And she stayed up all night. She said, she did not want to go to bed. Unfortunately, I had to make sure she go to bed because school was the next morning. But I remember just that excitement. that was just boiling in her belly in wanting to know if he was going to win, because we represent so much more than ourselves. Of course, for my students, they were very happy. And as I said earlier, just seeing me win that awards make them think that the sky's the limit. I've been traveling a lot as a result of the prize. And, I just want to be transparent that, this year has been a struggle for me at my school. This is a big change for myself, my students, my administration. But, I was glad that we were able to overcome a lot of those challenges. And, yesterday was my students' last day. It was our last day in school until next year. And so, but not much has changed for me personally. I mean, I think some people, I'm the same person. I mean, I think some people thought that I was going to be quitting because of the prize, but, I'm not sure why, because this is the work that I'm purposed to do. But, what has happened outside that has really changed for me is just, that growth professionally and personally. And the ability to stand before thousands of people and just
Amazing.
Who looking to me for new knowledge, for inspiration,
Amazing.
for motivation. It's kind of nerve-wracking at times, but it's really allowed me to grow, especially in my confidence in many different ways. So I'm really appreciative of the experience.
Well, thank you for representing us over here, all the way from Australia. I followed the journey, your journey quite closely. I'm a huge fan of the Barclay Foundation. And what's like, do you get recognized now when you walk down the street? Do people say, hey, that's the Global Teacher Prize? Or what's that like? What do people recognize you now when you're in Starbucks?
I do. They're all strange stories. They're just all different.
Yeah.
Because I'm also a twin.
Yeah. Okay.
It makes it even stranger because sometimes my twin sister gets approached. And everyone at her job thought she was the one who won the prize when she showed up at work because they didn't know she had a twin sister. And so, but it's been quite funny. When I go to, I think most of the recognition that I've had is when I go to all these big conferences. I mean, when I went to Dubai, I was surprised how many people in the Middle East knew me. Wow. Every time I go to these large conferences, ministers know about me, Minister of Education know about me, teachers know who I am. So it's a lot of people in the education space know who I am. So I feel really proud to really represent teachers across the globe and just represent, what the education profession and platform is all about.
Wow, that's so wonderful. And I saw a video, and I don't know if it was your family or your friends, but they were gathered around a television, and I think they were watching the ceremony. Yes. Was that your family or was that your friends?
Yes, my family. That's my family, my close family.
They went crazy. They were jumping around, and just it was really wonderful to see.
Yes, what happened was because of course virtually, I found out virtually that I won the prize. Because of COVID, they weren't able to get all the teachers together in one place. So in the filming, that's when I found out, but it was almost like an interview session. And then they mentioned it within the interview session, something around, since you're the Global Teacher Prize winner, I think, what would you do with, what would you use this platform to do, or something like that?
And you were like, excuse me?
And then I started answering the question. I actually was answering the question. And then she repeated the question. At first I didn't know. Then that's when they went wild because they heard it, but I didn't, because I was so composed in answering the question. And then she repeated it. And then that was when it really registered, and I just went crazy, and we all went crazy because, it's for someone like me to win that kind of award is just a real testament to the kind of hard work that I've put in over the years in education. in my school, in my community, across the globe, helping students to get into college and just access higher education and access their future and a better way of life. And just really, again, for me, just a milestone to where I've started in my life, growing up with my grandmother in our poor community, to this point where I'm considered, one of the top teachers in the world, which is a Nobel Prize for teachers. I mean, there couldn't be no highest honor. And I think when I broke down crying, it was more so of, I can't believe that my grandmother, who has put so much into me, was not able to live to see this moment.
Well, I'm sure she would be incredibly proud of you. And it's such a beautiful story. And I think if anybody was ever in doubt of the power of education, I think you have proved that it doesn't matter where we come from, but it doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what background we're from, but education really has that ability, if we're willing to work, to transform our lives. And it's really, it's incredible to see. I mean, what a journey. It's really wonderful. And I just wanted to just quickly refer to something that Mr. Jacob Scott, who I believe is the math success coach, said about you. He describes you as relentless when it comes to your students. So how on earth, firstly, do you believe that you are relentless? And also secondly, how do you stay passionate? And have you ever thought about giving up? Has there ever been a time where you think, oh, geez, this is too hard, I just want to take a holiday?
I mean, to answer your question, yes, I am definitely relentless. What motivates me is knowing that I have been through what most of my students are experiencing, and I can serve as an example for them. Like, I strongly believe, in my students, and even though sometimes the journey gets tough, sometimes I've never once thought about giving up. I've never once thought about quitting. I'm just not cut from that cloth. I'm a fighter. And that is why, I want to see my students be successful. I want to, and I really honestly don't lower my expectations for my students. Like, I really challenge them every day, because I want to see them rise to the occasion. I want to remind them when my students see me rising ahead, I want them to be reminded that they too can do it. They have the willpower. They too are relentless, because I teach immigrants and refugees. And I mean, when I sit and speak with my students and they write about their stories, and you think about their journey isn't as half as what, mine is not as half of what they have went through, and the trauma that they have gone through just to come to America to access a better way of life. And so, when I think about their story, I can't even think about quitting. Because if I quit, it's almost like I'm quitting on them. I'm quitting on their future.
Wow.
So, me having the motivation to keep going is just helpful. It's really helpful, because that reminds them too that they too, there's, I guess, what we always say, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and just, if they work hard enough, they too can achieve their dreams.
Wow. That's so important. And like I said, it's, I think just the power of education and the power of a great teacher that has, as you are, that's making a difference in children's lives is so important. And did you have a teacher that made a difference in your life? Was there a teacher that modeled this for you?
Well, I'll honestly say, because of my background, I was one of those students that most teachers did not necessarily mentor or take under their wings or push, because I didn't look like someone who would be successful in the future.
Wow.
I didn't necessarily have too many teachers speak negatively to me. I remember a few did, that resonated with me to this day, which is also what gives me that fire in my belly to keep going and to keep pushing. But I remember one specific person, John Messam, who was my coach. He wasn't necessarily a teacher, it was a coach. Coaches are so important as well, because sometimes you don't get it all in the classroom. Sometimes it's those people on the outside who are mentors that you're able to really connect with, that really pull out that strength, the desire, the passion that, I didn't know, I always had people tell me I looked like an athlete, but he was like the first person who pulled my sister and I to the side and say, you don't just look like an athlete. I believe that you are both great athletes and there's greatness inside of you. And if you give me the chance, I will pull it out of you and I'll let you see that you're great. And also, as I go into my senior year in high school, because of our financial challenges, I didn't see college as an option for myself. And so when he told me that I want you and your sister to run track and field, and I can help you to use your talents to get into college, it just opened our eyes for a whole nother level of possibility for my future. And I just put that trust in him. And like I mentioned earlier, he was the person who outside of school ended up becoming like a father to us. A mentor that we never had, someone who told us that anything that we put our minds to, we could achieve. He was like the first person who really made me think that, my future was bright. There are possibilities. My possibilities are going to be endless. And from that, it just blossomed into a great relationship that really mentored us into the matriculation process, into going into college. Fortunately for him, he has seen and witnessed a lot of the achievements that I have had over this period of time. Unfortunately, by the time I won the Global Teacher Prize, he wasn't as well enough to understand the accomplishment. And maybe a few months later, he passed. But he's always remembered for the major impacts that he's had on my life and who I am today.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story. And once again, I'm sure he would be so incredibly proud to see one of his students achieve what you have achieved. And what a great story. And can you maybe talk a little bit about the importance of sport and mentorship? Because I know that you coach a lot of athletes, and also why was it important for you to have success outside of the classroom as you did?
Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we go to school, and because of our background, it is so difficult for us to have relationships with a lot of teachers because they don't connect to us. They don't connect with our stories. They don't come from the neighborhoods that we come from. They haven't experienced some of the things that we have experienced. And one of the things that I see here in the US as well as a teacher in the minority is that the majority of teachers in the US are Caucasian, which is about 87%, and 13% is a minority. However, they do not necessarily represent the diversity of the student population, which is almost 50-50. And so when I talked about representation matters, right? When you have teachers in the classroom that looks like you, that you trust, that you can build that one-on-one relationship with. I'm not saying that many students haven't been able to build relationship with other teachers from other ethnic backgrounds, but it's really important that students see people that look like them, who have been through, who have their story. And that's one of the reasons I connect so well with my immigrant and refugee students, because when we sit and we talk about our experiences, and a lot of times when we sit as a classroom, because my students represent about maybe 23 different countries. And
Wow.
so when we talk about the different or the differences and the similarities in our countries and the poverty and the things that happen in our country, and we connect on a whole nother level. And so for me, it's so important that students hear our stories, right? Because as teachers, it humanizes us. And it gives us that, it helps us to share that level of empathy with our students. And in sharing, it helps us to build that relationship, which is foundational for students in the classroom, because if they connect with you, they're going to show up for you in the classroom.
Wow.
And they're going to trust you. They have a sense of belonging. They feel like you value them. They feel respected. They feel acknowledged. They feel recognized. And it's so important when it comes to even academic excellence. And outside of the classroom, students need to see you in their communities. They need to see you doing community service. They want to see you pop up at their local grocery store, so that they can build that rapport. Some students, it's difficult when you're in an academic setting, because as teachers, sometimes we have these high academic expectations, and it's really tough for students to kind of really separate who you are in the academic setting. So seeing you in the community makes them realize that, like, you're just like them. You live in their community, or you visit their community, showing up at town halls where you can have that conversation with parents, where, you can build that rapport, where the parents know that you understand the needs of their students, their children, and the needs of their community. And also the fact that they see you from a more humbling perspective.
Wow.
Because a lot of parents see teachers up here, because they think teachers set the bar, right? We're so smart, we're so astute, and we're so stately. So so they see us up here, and they admire us for what we do for their children. But sometimes they want to see us down here on a human level, where they can actually connect with us and know that we are here for them. We're their advocates. We're here for their children. We mean well for their children. And that's when parents really partner with you to make sure that, what you're doing in the classroom is successful, because that's when they go home and they start driving into their children the importance and the value of that education. And sometimes, even though parents may not see the value of education, just forming that relationship with them allows them to see it in a different light, and allows them to really push their children more. When we think about sports, a lot of children use it as an escape from the poverty, an escape from the violent community, an escape from gangs, and inappropriate activities that they are constantly bombarded with in their communities. And so we need to make sure that we're doing a lot more to foster that, giving students an opportunity to use their talents as well. For me, I may not have gotten, I honestly, because of my challenges, I was never a top student in high school. I was around the 3-point range in my GPA. So I was never one of those top students. And so I would never see myself getting an academic scholarship for college, right? But the ability to for someone to harness my talent and plug into me that this is an opportunity for you to use that to still access your dream was so important and so eye-opening for me. And so that's why one of the reasons my nonprofit organization exists is to have students use their talents as vehicle, as an option to really access their dreams.
Gosh, it's so inspiring, and I love just how much you light up when you talk about the power of education and what you've not only what you've achieved, but I love the service that you have for other people. It's really really inspiring. And Keishia, I just want to ask you a couple more questions about the obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc across educational communities. And it's been so tragic for so many people. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on what has that taught us about the important role that schools and school teachers do in terms of connecting some of those disadvantaged communities?
That's one of those big questions,
Good
but I
question.
think two things I would say that we can do a lot more. Um, and we could have done a lot more,
Yeah,
and that we need to do a lot more, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
Because the pandemic itself has really magnified a lot of the issues in our schools, and the school systems, and how we fail to serve the needs of all of our students and families all together. And it's really forced us to realize that all the things that we took for granted and how we underutilize resources or the lack thereof. And so the main issues I see, especially for my student population, is like the digital divide and food insecurity.
Yes.
And we are finally realizing that why, we're kind of finally realizing, when we think about why Tommy didn't do his homework,
Yeah.
and and he wouldn't do it because he had no internet or computer at work to do at home to do his homework, and he couldn't do it because he may probably had to go to work after school and would not be able to make it to the library.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then shows up the next day and teachers give him a scolding along with an F for his missing assignment, because there's no excuse allowed, right? And so this happened in a lot of urban schools. And a lot of our students and families rely on teachers and the resources and schools to give them those resources. And we fail to see that these are a lot of things that were missing that we were using to punish students.
Yeah.
So the lack of resources at home, and what our big expectations of them are, without providing them the necessary resources to be successful. When we think about food, a lot of our families relied on school as a main source of food. And so when school shut down, most schools actually took the time to do a needs assessment for the first time, right? Just to see how much our population of students, how much their needs was for food, and that school was the place where they came to get that. And so when we think about poor attendance, and when we think about the kids that had to work during COVID to make sure that their families actually eat, and then think about how those students have to provide for their families.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that kind of like brought a light bulb to a lot of people in schools, like, wow, these needs existed, but we failed to see them. So when you think about never figured out why little Johnny, why he couldn't learn, and why he came to school sleeping on the desk every day, or is distracted in classes, all his classes before lunch, because he was hungry.
Yeah.
And
So
his
simple.
lunch yesterday was probably his last meal. So it's made a lot of us do a lot of introspection and realize that there's a lot of things that we could have done, and a lot of mark where things were missing. And then moving forward, there's a lot of things that that we are behind in, that we need to catch up, because education is running so far ahead, especially through in the digital scale, and we're so behind. There's so much that we need to catch up on.
Yeah. Do you think, or are you optimistic that we can learn these lessons, or do you think that we will, I know this is generally speaking, but do you think we will jump back into familiar habits?
I think so far we're moving forward, honestly. I do think we're moving forward. Where I actually think that there may be some challenges, especially on the now that education is so internationalized and digitalized, is for those people who are older. And we know that change can sometimes be people who are older in the system, in the education system, tend to frown upon change. And they're sometimes very resistant to change. Because of course, we know with change comes a lot of changes, a lot of training. And some people are really on their way out. They've spent their 20, 30, 40 years in education and they're on their way out. And they don't have that vision. They don't have that vision forward. And so it's just trying to figure out what is the in between. How do we cycle those people out and bring in all those new ideas? Or how do we keep them in the system? Because they are honestly some of our more expert teachers are more, and they bring a lot to the education platform. So how do we keep them in and keep them still interested and help them also to mentor the younger teachers coming in so that we can all be on the same page and making sure that all the needs of our students are met, all of the needs of our modern students and our modern classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems, I think if we weren't optimistic, we would be in the wrong profession. I think that's a good sign that it's time to leave. I've just got a couple more questions for you, and I want to be respectful of your time. And this is a big question. Feel free to answer it however you see fit. But what do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy.
Big question.
What do I want my legacy to be? When I think about all the things that I've really accomplished, I really want my legacy to be that when I leave here, I want to be one of those people who people will remember for advocating for equity in education. I want to be not just locally or nationally, but just globally. I want to be one of those people that people will consider was a champion for students who were underserved and underrepresented. Wow. I want to go down as being one of their champions, and one of those advocates for higher education, and for advocating for access to higher education for all.
Well, I think you're well and truly on the way to achieving that. So it's a huge privilege, like I said, to get to speak to you. And I'm incredibly grateful that you would take the time and chat to me all the way over in Australia. And just a final question, where can people find out more about you and stay in touch with your amazing work?
Where can people find more about me? I'm on uselite.org. That's my nonprofit organization, uselite.org. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Keishia Thorpe.
Keishia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It is a huge privilege, and congratulations not only on the wonderful award, but also for your incredible advocacy for our wonderful profession. And so it's so lovely to see your amazing work, and it's a real privilege to get to speak to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you allowing me to share with you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Art of Teaching podcast today. I hope that you, like me, got some valuable insights out of our discussion. For show notes, please visit theartofteachingpodcast.com. I've one favour to ask. If you could please head to the iTunes page of the podcast and rate and review the episode. This would really help to get the interviews and resources to as many people as possible. Also, I've created a private Facebook group so that we can continue the discussion after each episode. The link is in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and until next time.